Not bad. Not bad. Not bad. So just a brief history. Belize was colonized by the British for 349 years. For many of those years, Belize was run as a dependency of Jamaica. As a result, much of our national archive during the colonial period is hosted in the National Archive at the Kew Gardens and or at the British Library. Just, a little shout out to my friends at the British Library. As a custodian of the UK's national collection, the British Library has a responsibility to safeguard it for future generations, to protect the collection from damage, theft, and any other potential cause of harm. The irony. Okay, so the colonial project in the settlement, later called Belize, consisted of signing many treaties with España for the forestry project, which is evident in Belize's coat of arms, and why Belize currently is still embroiled in a centuries-old territorial dispute with Guatemala. Belize was called British Honduras until 1973 and attained political independence on September the 21st, 1981. Raise your hand if you're older than Belize. While there were several decolonization expressions, so this is not to say that there were never decolonial expressions in Belize, yeah? There were several decolonial expressions by marginalized people. For example, the Maya resistance to land theft, enslavement, and displacement in the Battle of Yalbak, December 21st, 1866. There were several slave revolts, even though you won't hear about it if you take a history course in Belize. For example, in May 1773, when 50 enslaved Africans revolted, seizing control of 5 logging camps. And also in July 1919, which was a contentious year globally anyways, when riots in Belize town, now called Belize City, led predominantly by working class, dark-skinned black women, very important to remember that part, but called the ex-servicemen riot because Belize, like persons from all over the, sorry, I missed the line, called ex-servicemen riots because, of course, patriarchy. But also, this was because Belizeans, like persons from colonies all over the empire, were asked by King George V, personally persuaded by Kitchener, the Secretary of the State of War, to increase a British West Indian regiment in order that the loyal Caribbean subjects might express that loyalty in a tangible form, more tangible than all our resources. But anyways, that's a whole another story for another time. If you are interested, you can access this link, amandala.com.bz, the growth of Black consciousness in Belize. So, among others, there has been no systemic decolonization process in Belize. Independence is not decolonization, as famously said by Aimé Césaire. And like most post-colonial spaces, independence saw an extension of colonial attitudes, hierarchy, and enterprise. Belize's 2 main exports are sugar and tourism. Okay, and this is just, I ran last year a little Twitter hashtag called Black History in Belize Daily, because like most post-colonial spaces, we do not know Black history is not taught in school, Indigenous history is not taught in school, Asian history is not taught in school. I think here too, yeah? Or am I wrong? I might be wrong. Okay, so I attempted to get a licenciatura, which is the equivalent of a bachelor's degree in fine art in Mérida, Yucatan, Mexico, which is very close to my house. So I was blissed out because then I could just jump on a bus and go home on the weekend. I'm not a native Spanish speaker. I learned Spanish at the university while reading E.H. Gombrich's History of Art, which was intense if you're not a Spanish speaker. So, as a non-native Spanish speaker, I saw a lot of nuances in the language. Of course, Spanish, like English, like Portuguese, like French, like German, like Belgian, like all of these things are all colonial tools. So, one phrase that was told to me that is a part of, Mexican vernacular. Trabajas como negra para vivir como güera o como blanca, right? So you work like a black woman to live like a white woman. And this was told to me, aka black woman. So when I had enough, because I was like, okay, I'm done, I decided to do a parting performance style of, Abramovic. Not the football one, Marina. Right? I decided to go to the colonial square because the Spanish, this is what they did in their colonies, unlike the British that didn't really put stuff there. The Spanish everybody has these like very fancy squares. So this is La Casa del Conquistador, Francisco de Montejo. If you've ever been to Merida, everything is called Montejo, the bear, everything. The cathedral, the theater, and the city council. And the idea was to, as a subject of these phrases, walk around the square, you know, where people are just chilling, or like these white guys wondering, what is this person doing? And just walk around. So that was my parting performance. And then I went back to Belize. Now, Merida is considered the periphery of art culture of Mexico. So if Merida was the periphery of Distrito Federal, Monterrey, all the other places, Belize was the periphery of that. So it has been quite an interesting thing. I collaborated, and I still do, with the Imagination Factory. It's a contemporary art space in Belize. And so as my entry into Belizean art space, we did this ebook that also was accompanied by an art exhibit. So this book was about life, the art practice being like the artist's life. In 2013, because Belize is rarely in the news, and when we are, it's things like this, and or we have the royals there this weekend. Apparently everybody's protesting them that they can't land their helicopter or whatever. In 2013, this company excavated Nomul. Nomul is a Maya structure, thousands of years old, because this guy needed road fill because he was running for public office. He's run twice, lost twice, but he only paid like the equivalent of 2,000 pounds for destroying the structure. So 1 year after that, I went to the space with some Belizean artists, and I made copies of every single school thing I'd ever done in my life. So my Historial Académico, all my transcripts from Merida, from high school, an acceptance letter from John Carroll University, and an application for a scholarship because I couldn't afford to pay that. And all of these things I just folded and buried in a hole in the Nomul. Because what's the point of educating yourself as an artist if you're gonna destroy the heritage, yeah? Belize, like I mentioned, like most post-colonial spaces, suffers from coloniality. Post-coloniality is, it's a concept. It doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's like a fairy or a unicorn. So what I did is I developed an idea called the lab. The idea was to have within a formal space, a space that was less into gatekeeping, erasure, was more inclusive. But as a Black woman, honey, you get reminded real quick and real fast. Whenever the media in Belize would talk about my project, they would say that it's the gallery's project and I'm one of the participating artists. So just a little reminder in case I forgot. Okay, so my practice is mostly performance and installation. So I'm just showing you some slides of things that I've done. In 2015, a journalist was killed. This journalist was someone who was evidencing the kind of violence that happens in Belize. Belize is between Colombia and United States, so of course we're a part of that narco trafficking highway. Drug trafficking, sorry, I don't know what I said just now. Drug trafficking highway, and so we're, right in the middle of all of these things. I have generalized anxiety disorder and panic attacks, so I decided it would have been really cool to simulate, well, not really cool, but it would have been interesting to simulate what kind of looping thoughts happens just before a panic episode. So I had 450 post-it notes with very negative, untrue thoughts, and I just wrapped the gallery wall around. Belizeans, we won't say I haven't seen you in a long time. We'll say, oh my God, you got fat. So I decided that is legit how we get down. So I decided to do an installation / performance all about food, without food. Chose the table because, of course, the table is a site of many body image conversations. And again, I did another work on this, channeling or after Teresa Margolles. One thing I really love about Latin American art, Caribbean art, it's very, very heavy in social justice and social consciousness. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in other art practices, but I see it a lot. And so she made a bench out of concrete and the water that they use to wash the bodies who are victims of feminicides, because nobody does anything about the women who are killed. In Belize, there's a high incidence of child rape and nobody does anything about it. The church, who is so invested in protecting the institute of the family, are far more concerned with denying people who are marginalized their constitutional rights than they are protecting children. So I made this work. In 2017, I did my first artist residency at the Art House in Wakefield in Yorkshire. That was quite a nice experience. The theme was migration, so I was looking into ideas of play and migration. Coming back to our territorial dispute with Guatemala, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, my bad. 3 years ago, we had a referendum to decide whether or not we were going to take our case to the International Court of Justice, to The Hague, to have it decided, which I thought was very ironic because the indigenous people of Belize, who in our case are the Maya, have sued the government. The government has appealed. The government has lost their appeal. The government is still not prescribing to the prescriptions made in a court of law, but they are going to use the same legal system to settle this colonial dispute that we have. So what did I do? I often put in box braids, you know, and I was kind of talking about how borders are imagined, they're not real, they're not considerate of indigenous land usage, indigenous interests in land and, you know, all of these things. And so I made a 40-foot braid from these box braids, and I wrote a stream of consciousness type understanding of what's territory, what does it mean, indigenous land tenure, being a Black woman, dispossessed, you know, not knowing what part of the continent my people were taken from, and things of this nature. I am a Garifuna person. Garifuna is West African and indigenous, Afro-indigenous of the Caribbean, Carib, Arawak, and one of the West Africans, of course, you know, that's a legacy of enslavement. You don't know which country you come from or where you were taken from. In Mexico, there's this cartoon called Memín Pinguín. It's blackface. I saw it for the first time in 2005. One of my classmates gave me a t-shirt. I had that t-shirt from 2006. Last year when I did an exhibit, I decided to change the faces because the face was really, really offensive. Last year also too was a 200th anniversary of an enslaved woman named Peggy, who was savagely beaten by her enslaver. Because enslaved persons cannot give testimony in a court of law, well, you know, nothing happened of this case, but it was so brutal that if you look up the instances of brutality and of enslavement in the Caribbean, this case comes up. The descendants of this guy own the Coca-Cola in Belize now. They're very wealthy. Okay, I did that exhibit with a Garifuna elder, who's one of the most important artists in Belize. You probably don't know about her because, like all post-colonial spaces, we are heavily invested in erasure of Black women, you know, like invisibility of Black women. So after we did that exhibit, me and her were commissioned by the government to create a fabric piece, and this is in the National Assembly. This is where we have Senate meetings and where decisions are made in Belize. And so on her side, on the left, you can see what is Garifuna lifestyle, you know, the women, the men, what they do on their daily. For my side, it was very important for me to put a dark-skinned, generic female figure because our nationalist movement was spearheaded by these women, but you would never know because they are not discussed. Works being developed during my residency at the Gasworks. As I said, one of our main industries is sugarcane. Fun fact, almost 100% of the sugar that is produced in Belize is shipped to the United Kingdom. We had our first sugar works in 1937. It was developed on Pembroke Hall Estate, which was a slave plantation. In 1967, it was purchased by Tate and Nile Sugars, and by 1985, it was sold by Tate and Nile Sugars, which completely devastated that village, Libertad. Just before I came on the residency, I visited the abandoned sugar factory, and when I was talking to my mom about it, my mom told me that my great-grandfather worked here at this factory. I didn't even know. And also that he worked there until the day that he died. So during my residency at the Gasworks, I've responded to the location, the London Borough of Lambeth, where both the Residency House and the Gasworks are located. This area is home to two key figures, Captain William Bligh, who was appointed by Sir Joseph Banks, botanist, former director of Kew Gardens, and advocate of the slave trade, to bring breadfruit from Tahiti to the Caribbean because Banks said it was cheap and nutritious food for enslaved Africans on British-owned sugar plantations. Lambeth was also home to Henry Tate, Esquire, J.P., 1st Baronet, a philanthropist, a donor to the arts, education, religious instruction, and health. He donated resources for 4 free libraries, as well as art and resources for the former Millbank prison to be converted to the National Gallery for British Art, now called the Tate Britain. I am currently doing a video performance series called Eating Sugar in Front of Henry Tate, in front of the libraries and the Tate Britain. His name or likeness generally in the frame in the background. I'm also looking at fruits, blossoms, flowers, and plants that are directly and or indirectly connected to sugar plantations and this borough, breadfruit, sugarcane, plantains. Noteworthy, and can someone help me to pronounce this last name? I'm having an issue. Trade scan, how do you say it? Tradescent, how is it? Help. This word, okay. So these people, okay, I don't want to mispronounce anybody's name. Also lived in Lambeth. They traveled to the Americas and sourced many plants. My initial proposal required research at, among other places, the British Library and the National Archives, but as I didn't have an accurate or viable or believable looking proof of address, I wasn't able to do that. And so I was kind of flipped the bird at the British Library, and so I decided to make some soft work. So I have 5 videos. They're in loop in my studio where I sit, stoop, stand in front of structures that were donated by Henry Tate. The reason why I was doing this was because I mentioned my personal experience with my great-grandfather, but also because sugar in the beginning of its existence was only for wealthy people. Only wealthy people could have sugar. The Tate is heavily invested in distancing Henry Tate from his participation in enslavement, which is impossible to do with sugar and or rum. Those are slave industries. There's no other way to cut it. And so these are just stills from those. This is my little love letter between me and the British Library. And their response and my response. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for visiting my gallery. Also, I really want to thank the Gasworks. I want to thank the staff of the Gasworks. They have been more than extremely helpful to me. I don't have pay apps, I don't have a credit card, so I depend on them for everything. You can ask Len, you can ask Joel, you can ask Sabel, you can ask Alessio, even Alex sometimes. I know Alex doesn't have to bother with us. I'm like, Alex, can you assist? So I really, I want to thank Gasworks. I want to thank Elephant Trust, how they manage the Sheila Wakely bequest. I want to thank Catherine Patigas. I mean, listen, I am so grateful. This has been exponential to my practice. I don't have a studio and resources at home. I don't even really have places to show my work. That's why I use social media. So thank you from, the deepest, most profound part of me. Thanks.